transmissions detected.
Kill them all.
Shall we play a game?
All in! And gathering in a square. All right.
Have any of the drone sightings been accompanied with sightings of a large rectangular black object, sometimes called a monolith, often accompanied by Also sprach Zarathustra by Richard Strauss?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I would probably have to think back to the words of a very wise prophet, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Obi-Wan. Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time. A long time.
Are all of these either civilian or otherwise, but just not Department of Defense drones?
You're talking about the drones in New Jersey up and down the... Yes, they are not DoD assets.
Hey, Mayor Hurd here. And it's true, the government is actually lying to us. Tell me about the orbs. What are these orbs? What's flying around our homes? We need answers, and we need answers now.
Let's do the grab the rifle by the bottom thing. Arr! All right. Now let's do the, the shoulder thing. Arr, the shoulder thing. Arr! Arr! Yes.
There are now hundreds, maybe even thousands of credible accounts.
These are just hobbyist drones. They're not military drones. Why is it a classified briefing on the Capitol Hill?
I'd have to refer you to Congress on that.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
All right, and now the showing the rifle for the inspection bit. Go, huh?
Yes, I'm living at a place that kills. Ooh, yeah. Running with the devil. Running with the devil. I'll tell you all about it. I found the simple life. It's so simple.
Hello, my friends. Today I will attempt to document what seems almost impossible to explain. It's what's really going on around us. You see, for quite some time there's been a coordinated effort to set the stage for the big show. Most of us knew this when we saw that their old toys were brought out to play with. And these drones or orbs are being seen all over the world, and they're doing nothing but confusing and scaring people. It's all being done in hopes that the masses will panic, or at least a portion of us will, and maybe their assistance will be needed in restoring order. Now, after World War II, the next big conflict came, Vietnam. And this war almost cost the powers that be the ultimate price. And there's a lot to unpack with it, but ultimately, by the late 1960s, everyone was sick of war. They were sick of the government's lies and deceit. Every country seemed like it went through a period where scandals just rocked their nations, and the famous 70s and 80s came along. Life wasn't perfect, but compared to now, it was a fairy tale. And this good time lasted until about the mid-90s when it started to deteriorate. And the main area was in schools. All those teachers we had inevitably retired. New ones took their places, and nobody was paying attention because, we all graduated, our parents no longer, cared. Then you had professors and colleges, places of learning. They started being influenced and funded in certain ways to push a certain narrative. Now, we know this was very successful. We see it, right? And then we had terrorists, the Gulf War, the Iraq War. It became insane, as if all of a sudden one day the bad guys just crawled out from underneath the rocks and came out of the woodworks. And when your friends and family also, by the way, tell you about the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they're not lying to you. It used to be awesome. But they ruined it. And then we know that they lied about the Iraq War. They lied about Saddam Hussein. They lied about it all. So it was all a psyop. It was all the plan. Everything was going too good. They had to do something. Or, see, we don't need them if there's nothing wrong, So slowly, over 25 or 30 years, what was once an era starting to become more peaceful. Like we literally looked like we were going to be more tolerant, more family friendly. But then it just turned into this evil three-ring circus. What they ultimately want, and when I say they, I'm referring to the entirety of this New World Order organization, you know. It's for you and I to want their help. It's for you and I to need them to figure it out for us, you know. But they want us to decide, though. They want us to willfully allow them to use their technology that they have hidden away, like using their drone ability on American soil to gather information without too many complaints, you know, to protect us from unknown scary things like advanced drones and weird things flying around our skies. Now, if authority is given, nothing will stop them afterwards from doing whatever they wish, because don't think for a second that any government would back off when the threat's over. They're not going to relinquish that, you know. Complete domination is what's been planned from the very beginning. Now, it would be giving someone the ultimate advantage to have over an area or population if you let them, say, take off with their drones and start doing what they want. Especially in the U.S. where actual troops or men on the ground, that would be a death sentence to any army, any invasion force. They would be decimated by the firepower that the citizens possess. Therefore, using drones or robotic technology is a very good plan. You know, if it's used for good, that whole nonsense, right? But we know that that will not be the case, or the outcome of such a thing if it was ever allowed.
The other thing that I think it's very important to remember is that when we're here in the homeland, the authorities that the U.S. military has to detect and track these kinds of things is much different than it would be if we were in a combat zone. In other words, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities that we can employ outside the United States are much different.
Not normal, is it?
No, I've never seen that.
Who would you send this to? Eh?
That doesn't look normal at all. This is not normal at all. Bruh, what am I looking at right now? This is actually the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life.
After seeing it online, people were pretty blown away. Some tried to say it was just a military drill, but the locals around there weren't buying it since there was no military base nearby. So could it be that these so-called drones are actually something totally out of this world?
They're so bright. Oh my. Oh. What is happening? Dude, that's the brightest it's ever been. Zoom out a little bit so you can kind of just gauge how bright we're talking.
So over 1 million drones registered in the United States, and on any given day, approximately 8,500 drones are, in flight. And so the vast majority of these drones are going to probably be recreational or hobbyist. They're going to be commercial drones, used in things like architecture, engineering, farming, or they could be used for law enforcement. Is it possible that some of those drones could be up to malign activity? It's entirely possible.
I mean, I can't even comprehend what I'm looking at. There's a lot of smoke around them. I was going to say there's so much smoke. Well, I don't think it's smoke. It seems like a steam or something. It's because it's not coming from them, it's around them. It's not above them. Oh my God!
是不是有 UFO 啊？是什么东西啊？这个是？怎么在跑啊？
Arriba del aeropuerto de la FAB. Acabo de salir y veo esas luces. Esa luz verde es de la cámara, pero esas luces que están ahí ya están desapareciendo, pero habían bastantes. Solamente quedan 4 o 5 rojas. Ahí está, en color verde, rojo.
What the hell that is? Cause there's something coming out of that. It's going down further? That's crazy. It's behind the trees now.
Mason's getting a good video of it, dude. Come to my house, man. You can see it from my house. Oh. Oh, Madison will probably put it up on YouTube, man. You can probably find it on YouTube.
You mentioned that it wasn't all that unusual to see some drones over military bases. You mentioned this is becoming more and more of a common occurrence in the use of drones. But what would constitute it as a threat? What is the benchmark, and have you been communicating with other military installations to be ready for more of these drones, and how to spot if it could be a threat before it might be too late?
Yeah. Again, you know, it won't surprise you. This is not a new conversation for us within DoD. I mean, as I highlighted, drones flying, whether here or overseas, is not something new, right? And especially in the United States with 1 million registered drones and 8,500 flying on any given day.
Now, thinking rationally, if there's no war or conflict, then there's no job for, like, what, 1 million people worldwide? With no one really doing any killing? Places like Raytheon, Boeing, and Lockheed, now in theory, they'd have no money coming in to meet their payroll. They'd have to start making what tractors and plows? You know, that's not going to happen until God makes them do it, trust me. Whatever or whoever's in the shadows knows that they have to keep the show going at all costs. We would not need trillions of dollars in debt on us if there was peace and tranquility, right? Okay. So, in order for self-preservation and to keep those paychecks coming in, like I said, there must be conflict, there must be chaos, there must be money transferred. It's that simple and that stupid, right? Soon we're going to get to see a fake automated alien fleet coming to visit us. Why? Because they told us that a long time ago. I'm serious. I mean, whoever's behind it all doesn't even care if a few of us remember. If a few of us figure it out, if we know the plan, or maybe a few of us get the punchlines to their jokes too, that they don't care. They know that nobody's going to listen to you. They'll be too busy finding themselves, you know, being more one with themselves, finding and lifting their chakra, finding their inner being, their inner God, all that dumb shit. Arguing over nonsense and forgetting about what it means to be a human being. The younger generation, y'all do not understand that these are all snakes that we're dealing with. Later in the video, I'm going to let this mainstream professor of crazy tell you how he really feels about you guys. Because you see, if by chance you guys accept that space aliens are real, right? Just a little bit, it's game on. So do not fall for it. And we knew this a long time ago, you know.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Because of the crisis, because of the dangers that we face in the world, you know, some new and unpredicted threat, we need more authority, we need more power, and there will be nothing the people can do at that point to oppose it.
Well, obviously it's not going to stop with just drones. Now there are, you know, orbs, light, plasma, balls, whatever they are, some unknown craft. What's next? You know, why not put rubber suits or exoskeletons over your advanced robots and you got you some monsters too? Do not believe anything you hear and half of what you see, especially right now. Someone is definitely on a mission, and I think I followed the crumbs to the very end here. Remember, these people are professionals. They're actors, or they're just that naive. I just don't know. But listen closely to what the Pentagon official is saying to everyone. There is a hidden agenda. It's more authority on American soil. Plain and simple.
But again, the idea here is that by providing training, capabilities, resources, commanders are able to assess and make those determinations. The other thing that I think it's very important to remember is that when we're here in the homeland, The authorities that the U.S. military has to detect and track these kinds of things is much different than it would be if we were in a combat zone. In other words, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities that we can employ outside the United States are much different for very good reasons. We don't collect intelligence on American citizens.
Now you catch what he was implying? We don't collect info on American citizens. That's illegal, you know. We don't know who it is, or if we wanted to, we just don't know because we can't do it over American soil. You see, there's thousands of them. You know, they're not breaking the law. You mark my word, my friends, legislation will be introduced for our safety. You watch and see. And I can't believe that nobody's going to mention the fact that the same people telling us, you know, what's what, they're the same people that failed every audit they've had for the last 7 years straight. And I think to myself, why do we wonder where they get their funding from? Who's, you know, funding these black operations? We know billions of dollars go unaccounted for the last 7 years or more, and we know whose hands we put the money in. So what's the problem? Follow the money, right? No. They think that you and I are just ignorant, that we can't follow money, we can't follow facts like they can. It's clear. It's just a big bullshit lie. That's it. And it was several years ago now that the CIA, the DOD, the Pentagon, all of them, they got caught by our leaders buying citizens' personal information from big tech and then lying about it. Did we forget about this?
The Department of Defense has failed its 7th audit in a row. The fact-check team's Janae Bowens joins us with the major issues. Janae, the Pentagon, it's massive. Is that in part why they've never passed an audit?
Yeah, Dee Dee, one of the biggest issues is the department's size, with it being the country's largest government agency. There's a lot to keep up with. Now, the agency says they have a budget of more than $800 billion. Another thing is they just started doing audits in 2018, so keeping track of their resources in this way is somewhat of a new concept.
The fear that I have regarding the outcome for America of these disclosures is that nothing will change. People will see in the media all of these disclosures. They'll know the lengths that the government is going to grant themselves powers unilaterally to create greater control over American society and global society.
The amount of information available for the government to buy would, quote, knock your socks off.
This report shows that the CIA has secretly conducted its own bulk program and that it has done so entirely outside the statutory framework that Congress and the public believe govern this collection, and without any of the judicial, congressional, or even executive branch oversight that comes with FISA collection, which is the law that governs FBI surveillance. This basic fact, these lawmakers say, has been kept from the public and from Congress.
We don't collect intelligence on American citizens.
I ought to hold me back. No, let me go.
The Defense Intelligence Agency has acknowledged it obtains and purchases actual U.S. location data.
We've got to protect our phony baloney job, gentlemen. We must do something about this immediately.
Are there any constitutional or statutory limits on your agency's purchasing of the location information of Americans? Constitutional or statutory limits, any?
Thank you for the question, Senator Wyden. I would say yes, there are absolute and very clear guidelines for all of us. And when we purchase the bulk data, the first thing we do is we exclude all of the data that is within U.S. territory and is on U.S. citizens as the very first step.
Bullshit. 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 Bullshit.
Very good, as you were.
It means go back to what you were doing.
But they won't be willing to take the risks necessarily to stand up and fight to change things, to force their representatives to actually take a stand in their interests. And the months ahead, the years ahead, it's only going to get worse until eventually there will be a time where policies will change, because the only thing that restricts the activities of the surveillance state are policy. Even our agreements with other sovereign governments, we consider that to be a stipulation of policy rather than a stipulation of law. And because of that, a new leader will be elected. They'll flip the switch, say that because of the crisis, because of the dangers that we face in the world, you know, some new and unpredicted threat.
And you see, all the TV and movies that we were programmed with got our imagination ready for the big show. Everything from Star Trek to Star Wars and many other science fiction movies from our past told the future to a T. Almost like the scientists watched the same movies we did, right? And every day there are videos and pictures of orbs and flying machines from all over the world. And they seem to prefer playing around mainly at night, not always, but mainly at night. And I think that's for maximum lighting effects. Why would you put all those lights all over your stuff like that? It doesn't make sense. Now the weird star-like electrical spheres or plasma-type orbs, well, that's different. Who knows what the hell that is? It seems to do unnatural things, but so does the craft. It's odd for solid objects to be doing any of that. And despite the 80 or so years of credible witnesses and accounts of them, well documented by our governments, nobody we pays appears to know or want to say that they know what they are or what they want. Who cares, right? Well, there's a backstory to all this, and it's pretty crazy. And to tell it or articulate it correctly to you, certain events have to be known first that'll shed light on any of the gray areas. Now, these craft were officially entered into the record of a major city in Germany almost 500 years ago. Now, it said, in the morning of April 14th, 1561 at daybreak, between 4 a.m. and 5 a.m., a dreadful apparition occurred on the sun. And this was seen in Nuremberg in the city before the gates and in the country, by many men and women. At first there appeared in the middle of the sun 2 blood-red semicircular arcs, just like the moon in its last quarter. And in the sun, above and below and on both sides, the color was blood. There stood a round ball of partly dull, partly black Ferris color. Likewise there stood on both sides, and as a torus about the sun, such blood-red ones and other balls in large numbers, about 3 in a line and 4 in a square. Also some were alone. In between these globes were visible a few blood-red crosses, between which there were blood-red strips, becoming thicker to the rear and in the front malleable like the rods of reedgrass, which were intermingled among them 2 big rods, one on the right, the other to the left, and within the small and big rods there were 3, also 4 and more globes. Now these orbs and craft all started to fight amongst themselves, so that the globes, which were first in the sun, flew out to the one standing on both sides. Thereafter the globes standing outside the sun, and the small and large rods, flew into the sun. And the globes flew back and forth amongst themselves, and fought vehemently with each other for over an hour. And when the conflict in and again out of the sun was most intense, they became fatigued to such an extent that they all, as said above, fell from the sun down upon the earth, and they burned up, and they then wasted away on the earth with immense smoke. After all of this, there was something like a black spear, very long and thick, sighted in the sky. The shaft was to the east, and it had pointed towards the west. What was this, a mothership, you know? Now these orbs and craft show up again 5 years later after some sort of natural event, a fire or something. But it was in Switzerland. It says it happened in 1566 3 times. On the 27th and 28th of July, and on August 7th, against the sunrise and sunset, we saw strange shapes in the sky above Basel. It started on the 27th of July after the sun had shone warm on the clear, bright skies. Around 9 p.m. the sun suddenly took a different shape and color. First it lost all of its radiance and luster, and it was no bigger than a full moon. It seemed to weep tears of blood, and the sky behind it went dark. It was seen by all the people of the city and the countryside in much the same way also the moon, which had already been almost full, had shone throughout the night, and it assumed an almost blood-red color in the sky as well. The next day, Sunday, the sun rose at about 6 o'clock and slept with the same appearance it had when it was lying before. It lit the houses and streets and around as if everything was blood-red and fiery. A few days later, at the dawn of August 7th, is when we saw large black spheres coming and going with great speed and precision before the sun, and they chattered as if they led a fight. Many of them were fiery red, and soon they crumbled and then extinguished. So is that normal? These things were there almost 500 years ago doing the same thing. Who is this? What is it? Why are they here? Where they come from, you know? Well, that's not the wildest story. Now, 2,000 years ago, and to prove this is old news, and the reason that it's just dismissed, okay? Someone doesn't want you and I to put two and two together. Obviously, the people who documented those events in the 1500s were telling the absolute truth, because based on what we're seeing today, they were. So what about 1,500 years before their time? Well, we got that too. In the official records of Rome's Tiberius Julius Caesar Augustus. Say that name fast. It says an orb of brilliant light shining like a star came down and hovered near the place where they buried their dead. And the Roman soldiers who were guarding the tomb of Jesus that night explained that they were incapacitated somehow by some otherworldly presence when it came down to the earth. And, well, there was chaos and Jesus was gone. Okay, well, it's to be noted that if a Roman guard were to fall asleep on duty or, say, abandon their post, run in fear, the penalty was death. None of the soldiers that night were charged with anything. The witnesses claimed that the orb or star was vibrating, some sort of vibration, and the ground began to appear as if it was moving under their feet. A feeling of dizziness and lightheadedness overtook them. When they woke up, they all ran in fear, and they did abandon their posts. It was because of the supernatural events that they witnessed just before they passed out. You see, along with this light or star that came from the sky was the sound of music and even singing. But that's not the weird part about it. It said that everyone there that night noticed that the dead began to rise from their graves and dancing and singing in the light. And during that moment, because of what manifested itself in that quiet graveyard that evening, some people had heart attacks and passed away, including one of Jesus' friends. Now, this event was written and signed off in official records of Caesar that day. I don't know, but it seems really odd to make up something so crazy for no apparent reason. Now fast forward a couple thousand years to the 1940s. The pilots in World War II gave these light balls and crafts we see today the name Foo Fighters. And it was noted by them that as long as you left them alone and let them play around in the sky and do what they wish, they wouldn't harm you. If you engaged them in any way, they would shoot you down. Now that's scary, being that they're so mysterious and obviously a bit dangerous, you know. But we get told that nobody in the scientific community or the government feels the need to address it or anything. It's just kind of a closed book thing that nobody cares. No answers today, not even a small attempt to explain any of it. Now they say it's nothing and deem it today as secret, and we can't tell you about these orbs, right? It doesn't make any sense. Maybe the plan is just to keep acting like they don't exist, or just keep lying about it, and it'll just go away. I don't know. But they're well documented, as are all other strange things that happens around us. And if these are aliens, like mainstream suggests and wants me to believe so badly, okay, why are they being so creepy about it all? What did they do with the cow's face and the eyes and brains they took all those years, you know? Let's not forget, they obviously drank blood, okay?
Any link between the UFO phenomenon and cattle mutilations, do you believe?
I've talked to people that have investigated that, and credible people, and I've seen the photographs, and I know they've tested the blood, and it's really undeniable that there's something going on there.
And the cuts are often surgically precise. It's excising specific organs inside the body, often with no discernible external wounds.
Yeah, it's not as though they were just, shot and have a bullet wound or something. They're lying on the ground. There's been some surgical cuts, and it's usually the same cuts over and over again. And often the blood is drained, and it's really bizarre. Well,
I just had to throw that in there. But what are they doing? I don't trust everything's just cool. Because if we're supposed to trust that, these scientists are telling us the truth and we're buying into these aliens, well, considering what I know from the past, alien or not, something's going on. I mean, why have we not ever been introduced, number one? Are they scary looking or something? I mean, when we see them, will we know something's wrong? Perhaps. And what exactly was their original mission? If these are aliens, what was their mission? Tell me. Besides being weird, think about that. What it means if they are real. That means we were visited by what, Spaceballs? I mean, always crashing, having issues, God knows what they're doing to people, Maybe they're just shy though, maybe they don't want to startle anyone. When they get their nerve up, they'll come say hello. And they're not leaving too, And I'm pretty sure somebody will give them citizenship, you just watch. But there are many questions to be asked, and there's more serious ones. If it's really an alien race that we're dealing with. I mean, think of the consequences in this day and age, what the plan really could be considering who's in charge. Our leaders, and especially our scientists, are outright, they're out of their minds, They're insane. We can't count on them to be the voice of reason for sure. I mean, if we leave it up to them, we're doomed. And this is the problem right here. It all loops right back around to the start. The scientists, the chemists, the professors that are out there, the teachers, the ones responsible for disseminating truth and factual information, the ones in charge of academia. It's become a mockery of what it all once stood for. They're supposed to remain unbiased and not give in to their own minds, tricking them into, performing some flawed experiment, or for incorrect assumptions, false data. Now, this is a top evolutionary scientist. Oh, he's a real winner. My God. This person is who the elite and governments of the world let advise them. Now, I want you to think about what he's saying, when you hear it, and understand that people like him, and I'm not just picking on him, he's probably a nice guy, okay? But what he's saying is what people are being advised with. They're not being advised by someone wise. They're being advised by someone who, dare I say, talks to demons? And you know what? It sounds stupid coming from me. Let's just let him tell you.
Going back to the time of Australopithecus africanus, right between when we stood upright and where we are now.
Their brains are bigger, right?
Much, much smaller.
Oh, really? I thought they were bigger.
3.5 million years ago, they were a third the size of ours. They were about 420 cubic centimeters. And our faces have shrunk back. So we have this trade-off between the brain and the face. Brain grows out, expands.
Face gets smaller.
Face gets smaller, teeth get smaller, and we have a chin. As that happens, we have what's called a mental eminence, where our teeth and our masticatory muscles retract and recess so much that we have a little chin that sticks out.
Right, and this has a lot to do, from what I understand, this has a lot to do with the way we ate in our diets back then, like chewing meat all the time.
Yeah, and tool use too. We started to be able to cut our meat. We could cook our meat, which was a big one. Going back 1.8 million years ago, we started using fire. And we can also process our food. We can cut into smaller strips. We can cook it. We can pound up fibrous plant materials.
I'm ready to go in, Coach. Just give me a chance.
Let's talk about this for a minute. Your book, Revelation, with a beautiful, beautiful artistry depiction of Jesus.
Olaf and Dan. I had that commissioned. And
Jesus Christ is being sucked up into a spaceship, a flying saucer, throwing us the double bird.
The double bird, yeah. And you know, I'm not here to bash the Bible or any religion per se. I only bring it up because there is something to be said for the original teachings of this one individual.
We have tons of evidence of UFOs around schools, showing themselves to children, and then around like military bases, activating and deactivating nukes. Yeah. These children they get these telepathic communications about saving the planet, about nuclear destruction. You had the one lady who was brought to like a hilltop where they showed a bunch of like rockets and stuff like that, and they said, we're not going to make you forget this, or we'll make sure you don't forget this. It seems like whatever this phenomena that's happening, that people are experiencing, there's a very unique correlation between all of them, where it's like keep the planet safe from destruction, and don't annihilate the planet, right? And save, don't kill other species. Even in some of them talk about like, even like, I forget who it is. I think Chris Bledsoe was in here saying that he had an experience where they were like, don't kill other animals or anything like that. Yeah. But it's like preservation of the planet and the species, it seems like. And if this was an extraterrestrial race coming to our planet, it wouldn't make a lot of sense that they would, like, why would they care that we preserve ourselves? But if it was a future human race, you would see how they would be very invested in preaching that message to us to protect the planet.
So for him, what he told me is that he knew he was coming up to meet Heidi. He didn't know what was happening. So Heidi was, I hate using the word taken over, you know, but I don't know what else to use. It's not like a body snatchers thing. It's just her consciousness was sort of moved to the side a little. And they got in her head down at this Halloween party that was happening. And of course, people were like, oh, you were on drugs. No, I wasn't. I do enjoy drugs sometimes. Legal ones, of course. But I had one beer. And I didn't have any money, and she was like, well, VIP room, there's tons of beers nobody drank at this VIP party, we'll go up there. So that's when she was co-opted. That's a better word than taken over.
Sure.
But she was texting Eric to bring him there to perform this thing that apparently took both of them. He didn't know why he was coming, but he saw me out on the balcony, sitting in this chair. He saw her standing behind me and said as soon as he walked in and saw Heidi, that's when he was switched over. Whoa. And from that point on, he was them. He was used as this conduit through which they were doing this thing. But I wasn't talking to Eric at all. I was talking through Eric to whatever this advanced non-local consciousness is, and he was being used for them to talk to me as well. But they did that to me again about 3 months later. I got the sense that there was something above my house. I can't prove it. And actually, a lot of the things that have happened, you know, can be taken with a grain of salt because I don't have proof. This one that they did in Phoenix, I feel like they did intentionally and made sure there were other people involved and there were people watching. Whether they manipulated them too, it seemed that they did. There was one individual inside that remembers feeling concern and seeing what was happening out there, but not a sense of like who was there. He can't put faces on the other people, which seems to indicate they were sort of being altered as well. Or the three people that came out and turned in unison and walked back inside like that, even out of my periphery, I was like, that's weird. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly how deep or how far those threads expand outside of what was happening on that balcony, but there were other people that can corroborate this. That's important. The other ones you could write off as just schizophrenia or just me experiencing something I don't understand, which is fine. I don't, you know, it's hard when people talk about these things. It's hard to find the right words. It's hard to convey it to people who haven't experienced the same types of things. And it also just sounds insane. I'll be the first to admit that. All I can do is tell people honestly and with sincerity what happened and allow them to take other data points and form their own opinion about what it is and what it might mean, you know? And I'm not lying. It would be really difficult to lie. I've never been a liar because it seems impossible to like keep a lie going. You know, you have to remember everything you said before. So
got to remember the lies.
Yeah, I could never do that. It would stress me the hell out. So I'm just saying what happened. But one thing that did occur that there weren't other witnesses to, I told my wife about it the next morning, is I was in bed. I got the sense there was something above my house. And I woke up and I was like, oh shit, it's the same thing that happened in Phoenix. Like I felt the information, saw like the colored lights coming into my brain the same way I did when they blacked out my eyes and put the information in my brain on that balcony in Phoenix. And I sat up and I was like, oh, that's weird. It's happening again. But there's no Eric right here. There's no Heidi right here. You know, what's going on? And so I lay back down, instantly asleep. And that never happens to me. I'm always up. I'm always like ruminating on everything that could ever happen to anybody I know and love. And it's, you know, anxiety. I never just lay down and go back to sleep. Half hour later, on the dot, sit up. Same thing. I'm like, oh shit, you know, there's the lights and the information again. Lay back down, instantly asleep. This happened 6 different times. Every half hour on the mark. But it's slower. When they did this to me in Phoenix, there was this stream of information coming in at a tremendous speed. And when I got up and I was allowed to leave, I walked through this room of people. A woman put her hand on my arm and said, "Are you okay?" And I couldn't even lift my head. Like my head felt like it was 50 pounds. And I kind of tried to look, my eyes always said, Like I was in such a mesmerized zombie-like state. I just walked down about 4 doors, laid down on the bed with my feet still on the floor, passed out for like 13 hours, woke up, same position, feet still on the floor. I also never do that. I cannot sleep like that. As another line of evidence too is based on what we would do in a longitudinal study of an individual is very similar to what those individuals who are lifelong abductees describe in these cases where they're picked up as a small child throughout their teens, 20s, 30s, whenever. As an aged adult, they know these people. They've been interacting with them their entire life, but case after case, they say they don't age. And that's exactly what you expect if they're using time travel in order to do that. You could do a whole longitudinal study on that one individual that for them, the abductee would be a lifetime, but for the researchers might be 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
They just pop in and out and get them when they want.
Whitley said the being that he asked, that he thought was a female, he asked how old she was, and she said ancient. What's her answer?
She's probably right. Ancient and wise. I would add that too.
Gun is digging into my head.
In addition to that, in my second book, I also list a number of other things that could help account for why it's so ubiquitous that they do come back and get genetic material. Sperm from males, eggs from females. Many cases, that woman, Terry, that John Mack interviewed as one of his patients, who was the one talking about being shown the missiles and the war scenarios. She was also subjected to a number of pregnancies, fetuses being implanted, extracted. Linda Jones was another one also in that book. Couple that with how commonly, like you said, experiencers speak of something coming, you know, some sort of cataclysm, something transformational, earth-shattering, whether that be a shift in consciousness, a sort of mass awakening, or something that really has to spur that into existence, sort of the dark night of the soul in a novel where you hit rock bottom and everything's bad, but then you emerge from it with this new insight and this new way of perceiving not just what's happening now, but who you were before. Maybe we look back on humanity and say, well, yeah, that was dumb. What were we doing? You know, in so many capacities, war, just overuse of fossil fuels, overconsumption. There's so many things. What an interesting case is the Pascagoula, Calvin Parker, Charles Hickson, and that was also in the 70s, I think. I'm really bad at dates, that's why I'm not a historian. But they were taken by a robot, straight up. No doubt about it, robot.
How do they describe it?
Elephant-like skin, hovering, club feet, antennas, 3 antennas, not like that, but like antennas, and made beep, boop, bop type of sounds. Picked them up, carried them into the ship where they saw fully modern-looking humans. And that's interesting for a couple reasons. One, the humans, you know, looked like nerdy scientists, and you're not going to go out there and pick up 2 big dudes that are fishing who are scared shitless of what's happening to them. You're going to send a big burly robot, you know? The one that came into Whitley's room initially had like a shield on it. He describes being small, but like he he mentioned them as being like the transporters or kind of the muscle of the operation.
Yeah,
but
he said
the
there was
woman he
these
interacted
little like
with,
ogre-looking beings.
whose job may be just that, like little abduction droids. I think I called them in my book. But then there was also the small grays, and then the woman, the tall gray woman, who seemingly have traits indicative of a more distant point in our future, a more evolved consciousness, and the ability to control these other forms. It's almost like they're using their mind to control what's happening, to orchestrate this thing, and to keep people calm to the best of their abilities in these moments. So I absolutely think they're not just going to use robots like in the Pascagoula case, but that we would eventually bioengineer robots. We get past moving parts and things that can break down and need oiled. But we will
we could 3D print a biological being, right?
Yeah, or even just hybridize using genetic manipulation the same way we went from teosinte, a corn of cob used to be about 3 inches tall, to the big, delicious ear of corn we have now, simply through the manipulation of genetics and selective hybridization, selective breeding. So we might be able to do that to create kind of a robot-like thing. Yeah, you know, the ones without genitals, maybe they don't need genitals because we're just making them. Maybe it helps explain that aspect of it. Because we can just create them. They're not reproducing themselves, but they serve some specific function with regard to the abduction itself, or they're carrying out, they're the worker bees, essentially, of these future humans.
The whole narrative in the UFO community or the government or whatever it is, it seems to be like a very big push to people want to conflate these things with angels and demons and the Bible.
Sure.
I seem to agree with what Giorgiani said about that, is that if we were to make this, whatever it is, publicly known, society, or who's ever in charge of society, the United States government, would want to put something in place that would bolster Christianity or sort of reinforced Christianity. In the case that if some sort of crazy technological thing would become known to the world, that it could have the potential to destroy religion.
Yeah. Well, maybe not destroy it so much as reshape it, or allow people different avenues which they can use to think about it. I mean, that again was probably the biggest theme in this most recent book I wrote. And the reason I did it as a science fiction novel, satirical one at that, is to explore some of these things you just can't talk about in a grounded scientific publication. But I feel like that's going to be the next big issue, is religion. It shapes so much of the day-to-day life of so many people. It structures life. It structures their behaviors, activities on a regular basis, the way they see themselves in this world, interacting with others, where you come from, where you go when you die. All of these big questions are answered by that. If you have something come out that indicates that much of what you believe grew out of these very tangible things that existed in the past and potentially came from the future, how is that going to force you to reshape your conceptualization of reality? For a lot of people, it won't matter, because religion is a belief. That's all it is. It doesn't matter. You can say, yeah, your religion, everything you believe in, Jesus was a time traveler, he was paranormal because he had the ability to do these things technologically and consciously and spiritually. Well, it won't matter, because faith is faith. It will bend, but it won't break. However, with a lot of people, especially the younger generations that have more open minds to science and different explanations for things, it may eliminate a lot of those worldviews that over time will eliminate the entire religion, simply because those that ardently adhere to it die out. And we see this all the time. It's a very normal process, but it might be a line in the sand that helps reshape the way we have historically looked at our place in the universe.
Well, I told you. Mainstream government and all the elites want me to trust they have our best interest, to trust the science that they're pushing, the science from the men who say we evolved from monkeys and pond scum. No thank you. But in that pond of monkeys, realize that's where they get their advisors who advise them from. To grasp that issue, you have to listen to what they're saying, even though they're not directly saying it, what they're implying or what would be reasonable to assume. Because if these entities are really visiting this dude, downloading information to him, How crazy would that be? I mean, I feel sorry for them if that's what's happened. And did you catch the info that every one of these abductees who are shown our future are given? You see, every one of them say that a cataclysm is coming. A threat is imminent. Just like those tablets, once again, the gods are going to come and cause destruction and chaos, you know, and they felt the need to warn everyone about it back then, and today it's the same thing. Whether they're from Mars or Antarctica, that's what the message always seems to be. Because I'm never going to forget the number that I saw. Don't forget what they put on those guidestones. 500 million people, that's the maximum amount of humans that their New World Order wants on this earth at any given time. That means what, 8 billion or so of us got to go. And where did that come from, you know? Once again, since the Babylonians, you know, when the populations were just too big, you know. And what it is they were too big to tell everybody what to do safely. So they pushed food shortages. They pushed, well, we don't have any goods left. There's too many people to take care of. There's only a little bit of oil left for our lamps and we'll be in the dark. There's only a little bit of grain left to eat and we're not going to have any more. Wars and rumors of wars and, oh, I got to take care of you and help you, you know. Their religion, always the religion. But if you notice, religion is always denied despite it's everywhere around us. And when these entities tell them the future, why try to convince the scientists? Why not go to just a regular person? Well, that's done for a purpose. You see, generally, a scientist will make a decision based on mathematical probability. They'll be more rational than, say, a layperson. Well, they used to be, you know? And if you convince them that they're going to help humanity, and it's what's best for their future, for the future of everything, they will blindly follow you and do as you say. Humans are scared to die. Not being scared of it, that's what makes heroes. But these scientists are no heroes, okay? Some of them, you know. Visit a person at night, get into their dreams and show them visions, do magic tricks in front of them. They're going to do your bidding. You know, they have had a long time to perfect that, to act like they are the ones with our best interests. They're the good guys. And this scientist spewing millions of years, telling nonsense like it's absolute fact, that's a sickness, you know? It's going to be our downfall if we just continue allowing it. Thinking we're being wise by listening to fools has never ever worked in the past. And these fools will think it's their duty to save humanity. Therefore, how would anybody kill 8 billion people with no remorse? Easy. It must be done to save our planet and humanity, you know? Now, this pyramidal system was in place once before, probably many times. Each time it fell on its face, though. But there was supposed to come a time when it would stick, when it would be accepted, or it couldn't be rejected so easily. Where'd they get that from? We may have already guessed where they got it, but we know someone could possibly be thriving in another part of our world, hidden away. We've heard all the stories, but could they have reached the point where technology's been mastered? I don't know. And what would that mean for all of us, considering like what we saw happen in the past? If a society somewhere on this earth exists, what would explain all that?
The elites in various societies that are engineering wars and pursuing a policy of divide and conquer for control over large populations on this planet seem to all be involved with these entities. They seem to all be like involved with what the Sumerians call Anunnaki, or what the Greeks called the Olympian gods, or with what the Bible describes as the Elohim. Or why are they reaching back through time to very deliberately oppress and manipulate more primitive societies?
Well, why don't we try to elevate those uncontacted tribes? Well, because every time we go around them and try to interfere with what they're doing, we get killed. They shoot arrows at us.
Sure, sure. But, you know, maybe they should have shot more arrows at the British, right, in some of these places. My point is that that's a very beneficent motivation on their part, meaning, okay, these are violent, crazy savages. We don't want to get, you know, shot down by these people. What fits the data, if you look at, you know, how various societies going back to the Sumerians were governed, is a much more explicit and active agenda of manipulation. And the manipulation is geared toward setting up a pyramidal caste society, an extremely stratified society where, you know, the vast majority of people are the base of the pyramid, and then an ever smaller group of people represent higher rungs until you get to those who serve the gods directly. In India, they call them the Brahmin. And their purpose was to like directly interact with the devas and to carry out their directives.
A new partnership of nations has begun. And we stand today at a unique and extraordinary moment. The crisis in the Persian Gulf, as grave as it is, also offers a rare opportunity.
There is no way in hell that a civilization that advanced would volunteer this kind of technology to any stratum of the U.S. government without an extremely detailed agreement having been reached. And that would have to have been negotiated by both sides.
To move toward an historic period of cooperation. Out of these troubled times, our fifth objective.
They were from George Bush Sr.'s administration. And when I say George Bush Sr.'s administration, yeah, and when I say George Bush Sr.'s administration, I mean also what he was doing to undermine Ronald Reagan during Reagan's entire presidency. Reagan did not want George Bush as his vice president. He thought he was a total creep, coming from out of the CIA. You know, he'd been former director of the CIA, and he's a 33rd degree Freemason. George Bush Sr. was 33rd degree Mason. And his grandfather was Hitler's financier in America, Prescott Bush. So Bush Sr., yes. Bush Sr., I think, is someone who like literally has at some point sat down with these 7-foot-tall Nordic people and had policy planning conversations with them.
A new world order can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace.
But here's the ethical problem that I struggle with as a philosopher. Why is it like that if a group of humans have passed the technological singularity, right? If a certain group of humans developed the level of genetic engineering, nanotech, artificial intelligence that we ourselves are going to have 20 years from now, why didn't they raise the rest of humanity up with them? And this is one of the most dangerous assumptions that people make, that we're dealing with like some kind of ethereal beings that have such a vast cosmic horizon of understanding. And so then the question becomes, why was that decision made, and by who, to occult, to secret away singularity level technology, have a monopoly over controlling it, and not only leave the rest of humanity benighted, but actively encourage and reinforce their ignorance, right? By, let's say, engineering the collapse of the Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity so that we lose the Library of Alexandria and the whole knowledge base of classical antiquity. Why do that? And moreover, here's the really disturbing implication. If we are now at a point, maybe 10 to 20 years away from the technological singularity, what are they going to do to stop that from happening?
Well, if aliens were here, you and I would definitely know it by now. Either way, with simple reasoning and a simple investigation, it appears the same clowns are here, the same circus, the same elites with the same gods, motives, and intent from before. You know, I don't know. You see, the new order starts off by attempting to freak everybody out so that we'll relinquish command to them, no matter who they are, where they came from, or their motives at this point. You know, an adult needs to step in, or a human that's competent and compassionate who understands what really truly is, you know, reality, right? Not some demonic vision or, you know, a dream or ancient tablet wisdom, you know. But I've learned to look for myself, you know, read the data that they're attempting to lie about. It tells a way different story than the one that they're saying. One that we had better understand. One that, as a human, we better understand. Because we're being lied to on a scale never before imagined. This is the other side story that goes against the evil and wicked men of Earth and their false narrative. And once you dive down this rabbit hole, there's no turning back. Listen to what real scientists and chemists have to say about that clown's millions of years and the evolution coming from monkeys and our brains outgrowing our eyeballs. I mean, this dude's insane. But listen to these real scientists explain all that jazz to you and how much it's just a bunch of nonsense.
Stephen Meyer earned his undergraduate degree at Whitworth College and his doctorate in the history of science at Cambridge. Now the director of the Center for Science and Culture at the Discovery Institute, Dr. Meyer's books include Signature in the Cell, Darwin's Doubt, and The Return of the God Hypothesis. James Tour received his undergraduate degree at Syracuse University and his doctorate in synthetic organic and organic metallic, I can't even say what this field is, in synthetic organic and organometallic chemistry from Purdue. Now a professor at Rice University, Dr. Tour's areas of research include nanoelectronics, graphene electronics, silicon oxide electronics, and carbon research into what the Rice website terms, quote, environmentally friendly oil and gas extraction, close quote. Dr. Tour has published more than 1,000 peer-reviewed research papers and holds several hundred patents. A century and a half after Darwin publishes On the Origin of Species, scratching my head and saying, fellows, this first question, where does life come from in the first place, that's a pretty big one. How is it that a sort of interested layman can only suddenly realize, you guys had this elaborate, what about this? Did science simply treat it as unimportant or so easy that they'd get to it sooner or later? The question of the origin of life.
Nobody knows the origin of life. Nobody has ever known the origin of life, but people assume, very much like the Babylonians assumed, that it came out of a stinking pond. That's where they say their life came out of, and their gods came out of that same pond. And that's the primordial soup model, and that model persists today. You look in any textbook, from elementary school to advanced college textbooks, and it will speak of the primordial soup model. Life came out of that there were molecules that came together, and they formed higher order structures, and that formed a cell, and that led to life. That is a bunch of nonsense.
If you believe, as Darwin believed, that the first life was a blob of jello, maybe you have pictures in your mind that suggest that you can get that out of primordial soup.
They just weren't that worried about the problem in the 1870s because they had a false idea of how simple life was. They thought a couple of reactions they'd figured out. But now you've got to figure out
now
the
origin. Now they have DNA. Yeah. How do you get that out of the primordial soup?
Right.
Why hasn't why hasn't the whole scientific establishment said, stop presses.
We're
Fellas,
in trouble.
We have a problem.
Yeah. That's what I've said. I said time out. I had a whole article called Time Out. I mean, you're sensing the frustration. Welcome to my world. I mean, this is the problem. This is the problem. None of this works. It's a bunch of science fiction. It's really nonsense what these guys are putting forward. And they're building their careers around this thing, and money continues to this day. 40 million euros was just designated to, in 10 years, figure out where life came from. And there's about 40 researchers that in Europe that are going to try to do this. It's really nonsense. We don't even know where to begin. We don't know how to take the simple building blocks. What they're going to end up doing, and I'll make a prediction right here, what they're going to end up doing is something that's analogous to what Craig Venter has already done. They're going to take a living cell, and they're going to knock some parts out of it, and then put the parts back in that they knocked out and said, hey, look, we made life. You didn't make life. You started with a living cell. I mean, this is what they're going to...
You started with a car. You took the carburetor out of one car and put a carburetor from another car in and said, hey, look, we made a car.
Because they're not going to know where to begin. There's so many problems. It's not just 5 problems. I talk about 5 problems because these are 5 you're going to have to solve, but that's 5 of 5,000 that are facing you that just to begin. None of these do we know how to make the polymers. None of these do we know how to assemble them. We're just lost on every phase. It is a big scam.
Isn't that still the argument? That if you give it enough time, somehow or other, it's an immensely complex procedure, but if you give it enough time, enough shocks of lightning, maybe we can't do it in a lab, but the real lab had billions of years at it. What about the element of time?
Time is your enemy.
Enemy?
Time is your enemy. Yes, because those organic
in the 50s, George Wald, famous scientist who worked on the origin of life problem, said that time was the hero of the plot.
Right.
Give it enough time that what's improbable will become inevitable. But Jim has
I'm perfect for you because I was using old textbooks in high school that were probably printed in the
Well,
50s.
we all still get this.
Is what's
We
in my
get
head.
these, yeah, same stuff.
So the compounds decompose. All those beautiful chemicals that they have stored in their labs in 100% purity, after a few years, they're not 100% purity. In fact, the RNA, after a few weeks, has undergone significant degradation. So the whole idea is that, oh, well, somehow one RNA formed and then it took off. If you have one RNA molecule, if you figure the half-life of RNA may be a month in water, you have to change that to a probability. That one molecule has a few hours to survive. It doesn't survive. Just like your pharmaceuticals, it says don't take this after 1 year. Now you want to wait billions of years and see what it's going to become?
The moment something passes from inertness to life, that remains a mystery to us today?
Yes, it remains a mystery. What is the very even thing we're describing when we talk about life? I've had scientists, I used to do this demonstration for my own children. So watch, I'm having scientists over tonight. Watch what's going to happen. I said, you have a cell, it just died. What is it you just lost? And then they start arguing with one another. There were two questions. I said, what is it you lost and how would you get it going again? They could never get to how we get it going again because they could never figure out what it is we just lost when the cell died. That's how mysterious life is. Now, that's not to say that we won't one day know.
The American Association for the Advancement of Science, quote, the lack of scientific warrant for so-called intelligent design theory makes it improper to include as a part of science education. The American Society of Agronomy, I didn't know such a thing existed, but there's an American Society of Agronomy. Quote, intelligent design has neither a substantial research base nor a testable hypotheses as a scientific discipline. The American Chemical Society, we urge education authorities to support curricula that affirm evolution as the only scientifically accepted explanation for the origin and diversity of species, close quote, even though everybody knows evolution doesn't even attempt to answer the question.
They say for the origin?
I'm quoting you. I got this off the web.
Origin?
Who knows?
No.
We urge education authorities to support curricula that affirm evolution as the only scientifically accepted explanation for the origin and diversity of species.
This is how stupid this is. This is, I mean, scientists are like everybody else. We want to allay our fears. We don't want to look bad. We don't want to spend 40 years doing things and people say that was a bunch of nonsense. I mean, we're just like everybody else. And they keep throwing this stuff out there and then you oppose them and they get all upset with you and they don't want you in their little societies. And it's like Groucho Marx said, I don't want to be part of a society that would have me. I mean, who wants to be part of this? This is really nonsense what these people are putting forth because you can't even define this thing. And that's what all the experiments are showing. We need something radically different. I don't know what that different is, but all I can tell you is everything that we are doing now is not getting us there.
Okay. There's an historical background to this because science arises in the 17th century in a decidedly theistic milieu. And the design hypothesis was part of the practice of science because scientists have...
Galileo, Kepler,
Newton.
Galileo had his troubles with the church. He believed, he was a believer in God. All these early scientists were...
Newton, Boyle, Kepler, they all made design arguments.
Right.
Okay, and because there are two contexts of scientific inquiry. There's how do things function? If I look at an automobile, I can understand in terms of the laws of internal combustion. But I can't understand the origin of the automobile apart from Henry Ford. I can't understand the origin of I can understand the iPhone by reference to the electronic equations, E equals IR. But I can't understand it apart from Steve Jobs. And so the scientists, beginning in the late 19th century, wanted to say that the kind of explanations and descriptions we use to explain or describe the ongoing operation of nature, and they would be properly materialistic processes that would be invoked, are also sufficient to explain the origin of things. And we have to limit ourselves to materialistic explanations for everything. But there's a fallacy
there. That just
there.
doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Well, it not only it may work, but it hasn't turned out to work because The problem is, if you're asking about the origin of life, there are two basic possibilities. It might be the result of unguided, undirected material processes.
Right.
But it may be also the result of the activity of a mind. And if you decide in advance you're not going to consider the mind, the creative intelligence option, then you will necessarily elect a materialistic explanation, and it may not be the best because the evidence you have may be actually pointing to a different type of cause. And that's the argument for intelligent design, that when we see this specified information, this is an indication of the activity of intelligence. This is what we know from everything in our uniform and repeated experience, which is, properly speaking, the basis of all scientific reasoning. And
if it is the goal of human beings to become smarter, to know more, not less, to become smarter, not stupider, to embrace options that seem reasonable and from which we can learn, rather than ruling them out and remaining willfully stupid, then intelligent design ought to be considered. Is that the argument?
Exactly. Otherwise, you have a sub-rational form of historical biology. It would be like walking into...
Are you calling Jim Tour sub-rational?
No, he's not sub-rational. He's doing great stuff. His work actually...
I'm trying to get a rise out of Jim.
Yeah, his work actually sets up the argument that I'm making.
Okay.
But if there are two possible options and you decide you're not going to consider one, then...
What kind of work is that?
That's not very... It'd be like going into the British Museum, looking at the Rosetta Stone and saying, well, I'd like to say that a scribe had something to do with it, but because I can't invoke creative intelligence as an explanation, I'm pretty much stuck with wind and erosion. But we know it wasn't wind and erosion. Something else played a role.
If I pick up this banner of intelligent design, to which I'm really quite sympathetic, it's a way of trying to negate everything that I'm saying. What I'm doing is I'm pointing out the obvious to everybody. There are so many scientists that don't work in the area of origin of life that agree with me. They see exactly what I see. This is not unique. This is not hard to see. Everybody sees what I see, except these guys that are working in the field.
He's performing a chemical accounting on these experiments.
And if I start invoking intelligent design, this is a way to dismiss me, so I don't even mention this.
Wouldn't be useful.
Yes, it's not useful for what I'm trying to put forth. I mean, life is utterly amazing. This is why I wrote an article that started out that the life that we see here around us, we can't explain. And we have this ubiquitous life everywhere. You turn over a rock, it's teeming with life. There's life, and then you put it under a microscope. There's life. There's all of this life, and we can't even explain it. We can't even define what it is. And it's utterly amazing. Really, utterly amazing.
Well, I think we just need to relax and stay calm and think rationally for a second. And just remember the little things. You know, remember that just because someone says something does not mean they're telling you the truth. The world we live in, nothing gets in, nothing gets out. We figured that one out for ourselves. And there's some seriously crazy things that go on, both natural and unnatural. So be careful who you give your authority to. Be careful who you listen to and who you follow. It seems that something or someone is on the prowl, trying to scoop up as many of us, or as many souls, I guess, dare you would say, as possible. They seem to be quite the rush, too. So maybe time's up almost. But who knows? Maybe our grandfathers were right. And you can't go wrong with just remembering the small things, the little things that you were taught that probably mean so much and we just ignore them, you know? Like having a little bit of faith, you know? Perhaps, I don't know, only about a mustard seed's worth. That's all you need and you'll be good, you know? I have no idea if what I said even makes any damn sense, you know? It's all just insanity. But that's what I just needed to say today. My love to you all. I'm Wild Dog, and I am out of here.
You push that button. Everything we've accomplished for the past 500 years will be finished.
He's entered the world code.
Sorry.
I don't want to talk. Honestly, I'm very sad. Believe you me. I'm not happy to even mention this little point. Look, I pray, I wish, I'm talking about myself. I want to find a leader that I can go and follow. As a bishop, I need a true leader. If the Catholic Pope was that true leader, I would have followed him. Who gives 1 penny? You're Catholic, you're Orthodox. We want a leader that will take us to the Lord, not to Satan. I would have gone, I would have ran to the Pope, and I would have kissed his feet and said, please take me. I'm weak. I can't do it. I need you. Grab my hand and take me to the Lord. But I'm yet to find one. I am yet to find one.
Transmissions detected.